Good afternoon. My name is Kevin Finch. I work for Sayers, and I'm giving a presentation today on what to do if you're a CISO that's suddenly put in charge of running a business continuity program. So on today's agenda, I'll give you a quick introduction, let you know a little bit about me and who I am and what I do, what I've been doing for the past few decades. I'll give you a little bit of background on this topic because it's kind of an interesting topic in the way that it came about. And then I'll examine, is this idea of CISOs running business continuity programs, is it a trend? And I'll give you some data related to that. And then for CISOs that find themselves in that position, give you a little bit of information on how to make this marriage work. Because information security and business continuity, they haven't shared a lot of the same work efforts up to this time. So this will give you some ideas on how to make this marriage work. And also related to that, some pitfalls to avoid in that situation. Then what I'll cover is 7 specific actions to help you if you find yourself in this position or if you find yourself working for a CISO that is taking over a business continuity program, some specific things to do to help make things go more smoothly, and then some final thoughts on the topic. So moving on from there, let's talk about who is Kevin. Well, got my MBA from Arizona State and was certified by the Business Continuity Institute back in 2014. So I've been doing business continuity and disaster recovery work for about 15 years. And prior to that, I did over 10 years of application support in client server environments. So, I worked in financial services, worked in transportation logistics, worked in manufacturing, building BC programs from the ground up. And I've also done some BC program work in banking. I've done some work in agribusiness, and I've even done some federal contracting and business continuity planning. I'm also a member of Disaster Recovery Journal's editorial advisory board and have been since 2017. So there's my contact info. If anybody wants to look me up, that's how you get a hold of me. So going on a little bit about why this topic. Well, August of 2022, I took a trip to Atlanta and I was speaking at a conference there. And while I was there, we had a number of clients in Atlanta. So I met with 3 separate CISOs over the course of 2 days. There was a big commercial bank, somebody that worked in the home services industry, and a big healthcare conglomerate. And the interesting thing about it was that for all 3 of these CISOs, all 3 of them had been recently put in charge of business continuity programs. Within the past month or 2 prior to that meeting. So, that's interesting. But is it really a trend? Because I understand that 3 data points don't necessarily constitute a trend. However, if we take a look at Business Continuity Management's BC Trends annual report, they have several thousand people around the world go through and fill out surveys and talk about the status of their business continuity programs. But we can see here that, who's your program sponsor? And we can see that 10% of BC programs now report up through CISOs or chief security officers, which I think is interesting and could constitute a trend because CISOs have been around since about 1994, but they haven't really been widespread for all companies until 5 or 6 years ago. So I'm going to call that a big maybe as to whether or not it's a trend. But, we'll talk a little bit more about it and I'll let you come to your own conclusions. But why do I think that this is happening? That CISOs are getting put in charge of business continuity programs. And I think one of the reasons why is that the roles of the CISO are evolving. There's, and that's not just the roles as far as the daily business goes, but also the roles that the CISO plays whenever there's some sort of crisis. If there is a cyber incident or a business continuity incident, CISOs are going to be involved in response to that in ways that they may not have been 5 years ago or more. Another reason why I think that CISOs are getting put in charge of business continuity programs is because they've got limited resources. And one of the things you tend to see when companies are tightening their belts is they'll, internally consolidate and try and put, a number of different things underneath one manager. And I think that's one of the reasons why we're seeing CISOs taking over business continuity programs. Additionally, one of the reasons why I think it's happening is because of increased scrutiny. Everything that the CISO does these days is getting looked at by a number of different people. You've got regulators, they've got a fiduciary duty to shareholders, customers and vendors are all checking out what the CISO is doing and what they're up to. Cyber insurance is getting a lot more demanding in what they're asking of companies before they provide coverage, and certainly the cost of coverage has gone up. And also, everybody's worried about ransomware these days. And that's something that generally falls underneath what the CISO tends to worry about. So, ransomware specific preparations related to business continuity and disaster recovery, definitely it's something that the CISO needs to be involved in. So, for some companies, it definitely makes sense to have the CISO be the guy that's going to be in charge of the program. So another question to look at is turnover also a factor? So this is an article I ran across just the other day and added it into the presentation, kind of last minute. But it's talking about, this is from CISO magazine, and it's talking about how 50% of CISOs are expected to be changing jobs by 2025. And, as you can see, this is February 23rd. So this is very recent article. But it goes into a lot of interesting detail about what CISOs are dealing with and some of the stressors that they have. So, it begs the question, how much of a factor is this in CISOs taking over business continuity programs? So, one of the quotes from the article is less than 0% unemployment in cybersecurity, which means, generally it's hard to hold staffing and things like that in your cybersecurity operations. But that also has moved over to CISOs. It's very easy for them to change jobs because CISOs often do change jobs. So as far as the CISOs go, though, more than 50% are challenged with work demands that lead to a poor work-life balance at least once a month. And, it's certainly adding to their stress. And, it's definitely a reason why we might be seeing CISOs moving out the door and going to another environment. Gartner also found that nearly 50% of CISOs are looking to change jobs, and 25% of those are considering a complete change of role due to stress. So I thought that was an interesting statistic inside the article. It goes on to detail how, some of them, they want to get out of IT entirely, move into sales, take up painting, different things like that. But definitely an interesting situation, the stresses that CISOs are dealing with. But Gartner suggests a change in engagement from CISOs may help in the long run. And why I think this relates to today's topic is that if CISOs are allowed to incorporate some of the things that I'm talking about here related to, running a business continuity program or, further developing the cybersecurity program and things like that, I think that additional level of engagement might actually make things easier on them in the long run. So I think that it might help individual companies maybe not have their CISO walk out the door. So moving on then, if we find ourselves in a situation where we've got a CISO that has taken over a business continuity practice inside of a business, how can we make this marriage work? And one of the things I think is important to remember is that since business continuity and cybersecurity both touch the entire business, then they have something to offer each other. We've got skill sets and techniques from each discipline that can be used to help the other discipline and improve the quality of what they're doing. Another thing we have to remember is that we need to encourage teamwork and make sure that there's better communication between departments because, generally speaking, information security, business continuity, in the past, they've been sort of siloed in the different things that they're doing. And we want to encourage teamwork and better communication so that those silos will break down and people will work together better. And a good way to do that is to add business continuity and cybersecurity teams into projects together so that they can interact together and share information and improve the quality of the work that they're doing based on, sharing those complementary skill sets like I talked about a second ago. So one of the ways that we can do this is we can look at doing tabletop exercises for cybersecurity. A tabletop exercise is something that people have been doing in business continuity for pretty much forever. But tabletop exercises, a business continuity style tabletop exercise incorporating cybersecurity into it really can do a lot of different things. It can help management get involved in response planning. It forces you to look at response plans holistically and make sure that they will function in the environment as intended. They can show you where your plans are vague or unclear. You can find gaps in plan coverage and get feedback on how to improve your plans and your planning process. And also bring people together from disparate parts of the business and get them talking about how they would respond to an incident when it comes up. So all of these things really could provide some genuine benefit to your cybersecurity program. And this is all This is all old school business continuity things that I think really do have an application in cybersecurity. Likewise, related to that, I think that we could bring some BCM style discipline to cybersecurity. Again, business continuity, they have a certain discipline in the way that they've done things for decades. And, some of those best practices for business continuity include doing a business impact analysis and plan testing, getting involved in change control processes and project meetings, putting together response teams, documentation of stakeholders, corporate policies, and annual review and update of plans. These are all things that, are their business continuity best practices. But if we looked at cybersecurity through this lens and there are some cybersecurity disciplines that recommend doing a business impact analysis, but, the plan testing, getting cybersecurity involved in change control processes, getting them involved in projects, having defined team membership and roles and things like that are traditionally done in business continuity. Cybersecurity could absolutely benefit from, adding a little bit of this sort of discipline to their processes and the way that they approach things. On the other hand, let's take a look at business continuity for a second. And, there's obviously things that cybersecurity is doing right that I think business continuity could benefit from also. So one thing I think that really business continuity could benefit from is look for business interruptions and try and nip things in the bud. Because it's fairly commonplace nowadays to have intrusion detection systems as a part of your, environment in relating to cybersecurity. But the same type of monitoring that those systems are doing, looking for anomalous activity, detection of performance impacts, looking for irregularities and backups, and looking at probable paths of entry and attack, and looking for threats, doing threat analysis, and looking at the integrity of remote access of the business as a whole. These are things that cybersecurity is generally doing, but these factors all impact business systems or can potentially impact business systems. And taking a look at this data that is gathered, looking for anomalous activity and performance impacts, problems with backups, things like that, that sort of data is something that can be incredibly helpful to the business continuity program in the way that they're putting things together and the way that they're approaching problems. They can take a look at this data and they can track trends. They can find better ways to approach things. Another way that business continuity can definitely benefit from a cybersecurity style approach to things is taking a look at post-incident forensics and analytics. So whenever we have some sort of security incident, companies will tend to go through and they'll do an exhaustive root cause analysis. They'll map out the full scope of the incident. They'll, look at actual costs and look at the impacts to internal, external stakeholders. And, they'll also try their best to take steps to prevent it from happening in the future. And that's an important thing for cybersecurity professionals to do. However, with business continuity, on the other hand, a lot of the time what they're doing is we get to the end of an incident and we go, wow, kind of wipe your forehead and go, man, I hope that never happens again. We don't really look as deep into the root cause analysis. We don't necessarily look into the actual costs and things like that, because that's just not something that business continuity traditionally worries about. They're more worried about the process of getting the business back up and running than they are about the process of preventing future problems. So doing post-incident forensics and analytics in the style that is traditionally done by information security professionals is definitely something that can be helpful for all incidents and something that can be helpful for strengthening a business continuity program. So moving on then, there's a couple of pitfalls that we can definitely avoid in a situation we find ourselves in where a CISO has taken over a business continuity program. One of the first pitfalls that you can run into is if there's an unclear leadership structure. So, if there's a formalized team, who's on it? And also, once we find ourselves, in an incident, who's capable of declaring a disaster, who's authorized to declare a disaster. Another aspect of this that we run into, as I mentioned before, is siloing. Because, you run into a situation where different parts of the company are going to have responsibility for different aspects of system uptime, system recovery, response to incidents, things like that. And siloing is one of those things that can absolutely get in the way of a rapid response and getting the company back up into the shape that they need to be. Another thing you want to do is you want to avoid problems with metrics. I think metrics are important. As I kind of joke sometimes, all the smart kids are using metrics to track their business continuity program, but that's absolutely true. Metrics are a good way to take a look and measure what you're doing now and seeing where you can go to improve things in the future. But you want to make sure you're using the right metrics, and you want to make sure that you're applying them in the right way to your business. If you've got a metric that isn't being utilized properly, it can definitely send you in the wrong direction. Another important pitfall to avoid is issues with delegation. If we're running into a situation where your CISO has taken over your business continuity program, what we have then is we've got a structure that has grown, and we've got a structure that has been combined. So you want to be careful about the way the duties are separated so that you've got a good idea of who's doing what and how they're doing it. And the other thing you want to look at is you want to look at the changes to your order of succession during an incident. And I mean, part of that's just the simple authority of, who is authorized to do something or act on behalf of the company or make a statement on behalf of the company, all the things that should be in your business continuity plan or in a crisis management plan. But you also want to make sure that you've got some clear lines drawn as far as spending authority goes. Because one of the real big issues I've seen at companies that I've been at when there was an actual incident was that there was money that needed to be spent on short notice in order to get the company back up and running. And if you don't have clear lines of delegation, clear order of succession, clear direction as to who has authorization to spend money in a situation like that, then it's going to delay your ability to respond. It's going to delay your ability to make those critical purchases at the point in time when they're needed. So along those lines, I've got some specific actions that I think are good to take. If your company finds itself in a position where the CISO has taken over the business continuity program. And, first I'll talk about, before I get into what the actions are, I'll talk into why these particular actions. And one of the reasons why is because running a business continuity program can be an uphill battle. In fact, it usually is. It's often difficult to get people to do the work that they're supposed to, because inevitably doing any work towards business continuity is going to be an additional task that is pushed onto somebody's plate. Whether it's helping out with planning or it's doing testing or a tabletop exercise or what have you, inevitably that's going to be extra work for these people. So getting that work accomplished can be an uphill battle, and that's something that CISOs maybe aren't as used to running into. Because when you're dealing with information security, it's a little bit easier to sometimes to be a little bit more authoritarian and less collaborative. And in order for a business continuity program to be successful, it definitely needs a lot of collaboration going on. Another reason why I picked these particular actions is because taking over a business continuity program is a lot like starting from scratch. And if you've got an established program and you're taking it over, you really need to go through and do an assessment as to, where are we? What do we need? What are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? Where do we need to go? You really need to do an assessment of program maturity and see where you are and where you're trying to get to in the next year or 18 months, 2 years, 3-year plan. All of those things are important. Another reason why I talked about these specific actions is you don't want to forget anything important. There's a lot of things that are important to do to make sure are covered in managing a business continuity program. And you want to make sure you don't miss any of those important points. And then finally, as I mentioned, alluded to a second ago, you definitely want to assess and track program maturity. Because if you're not able to drop that pin on the map and figure out where you are and where you're trying to get to, then it's going to be more difficult to have a successful program. But all that having been said, even though there's a lot of work involved in it, if you can save lives or save your business, the time you spend is definitely worthwhile. So, on to those 7 specific actions. The first thing that I would recommend is do a program maturity assessment. And what a program maturity assessment does is it goes through and it takes a look at best practices in business continuity. And I wouldn't say it's a full audit necessarily, but what you do is you take a look at the processes that are in your business continuity program and see how well you're aligned with best practices in the industry. And that's even seasoned business continuity professionals that are familiar with these type of maturity assessments and things like that will definitely see the benefit in it. And I personally was at a company, my boss and I both had more than 15 years of experience in business continuity, and we decided, hey, let's go ahead and do one of these assessments. It might be a good idea. And even though she and I had a very good idea what best practices were and how to follow them, the fact that we were looking at these same problems day in and day out, there were a few things that even we had overlooked in the process of developing the business continuity program. And so, it helped us it was really helpful to get that that realignment in what we were doing and make sure that we were meeting best practices appropriately. So definitely do some type of program maturity assessment as a CISO taking over a business continuity program. The next thing that you want to do, and this aligns with best practices, of course, but you should definitely freshen up your business impact analysis data. Now, BIA data should be refreshed annually anyway, but a lot of companies have never done a true business impact analysis, and they really should. That aligns in best practices, both with business continuity and with some cybersecurity professional certifications. But business impact analysis lets you know the way that your business is running, how they're operating, what is critical to the business, and what the impacts of an outage might be. And that data is valuable both to business continuity professionals and to cybersecurity professionals because it allows them to better guide spending in prevention and response whenever there is an incident. The third specific action I would take is to go through and update your policies. And the situation that we're finding ourselves in is we've got somebody that has taken over a part of the business, an important function of the business. And oftentimes when those moves are made in a company, they don't go through and update their policies immediately. And that makes things a little bit more difficult as far as delegation and accountability and other things like that inside the organization. So definitely make sure that your policies are updated so that they accurately reflect your new corporate structure. And ideally, there'll also be policies that are put in place to help lead your teams in the right direction. So if you're going through and you're writing a policy about the business continuity program and the way that it's run, ideally that's going to be, the policy is going to reflect best practices in that. It's going to, incorporate the creation of an oversight committee. It's going to put some information in there about tabletop testing and, what's done and how often it's done. Who's going to participate in oversight committees, how often those committees meet. Any number of different things can be added into the policy in order to make sure that the corporate policy is following best practices for business continuity. And then once it's a part of policy, it's a lot easier to make sure that it actually gets done. So if it says it's one thing to ask teams to go through and do a business continuity tabletop exercise once a year. It's another entirely if you've got a corporate policy that says you're going to participate in, a tabletop exercise once per year, and here's a policy that directs you to do that. Additionally, as far as specific actions go, I would recommend start using metrics. One of the best ways to show program improvement is to go through and have metrics. This is where we were last year. This is where we're going to next year. These are the steps that we're going to take to improve the program in this way. It's a great way to set up a roadmap for continuous improvement of the program. But the other thing is, and this is something that definitely information security professionals are used to dealing with, but if there's an auditor that comes through and they want to see, how well are you doing on this process, or, how well are you progressing, you've got your data right there. So you could go, all right, well, this is where we were last year as far as tabletop testing goes. We hadn't done one this year. We've done a couple. And, next year we've got 15 of them on the schedule because all of our departments are going to participate or whatever. You can go through and you can provide that information to auditors and you can show improvement. And, that's also something that's helpful when you're negotiating with business interruption insurance, is if you have those metrics in place, you can demonstrate your program improvement and hopefully that will be reflected in lower premiums. I've talked to a couple of companies where having that sort of information did precisely that. Additionally, for a specific action, you want to go through and validate your CMDB. Now, I've worked for a lot of different companies over the years, and I have never, ever been at a company where the CMDB was up to date. And CMDB, of course, your configuration management database that gives you the information about all of your systems and software and things in your environment. Having an updated CMDB will help your information security efforts, because you'll be able to take a look at what systems you have, what operating systems they have, what patches they have, what's out of date, all of that sort of information. But it's vitally important for disaster recovery to have an updated CMDB. Because if you don't know what you have in your environment, you can't make sure it gets backed up. And if you can't make sure it gets backed up, you can't make sure that it gets recovered. So, it's just as a matter of logic, you want to have good data on what's in your environment so that you can make sure you can recover it. So I think a really important part of, a CISO's duties when they first get there would be go through and validate the CMDB, show it some love, and make sure that everything's up to date in it. Next specific action I would recommend is some form of automation in the BC program. Any business continuity professional that's been doing it for a little while will tell you good BCM software is worth every penny, as far as the way that it leverages the time that you spend in program management and the time that you spend in collecting data. You can go through and you can set up reminders in most software packages so that people will go through and make updates to their systems, their data, their employee list, things like that on a periodic basis. They'll go through, they'll check their BIA data, they'll check their check their plans, check their response steps, things like that. But all of that stuff, when it's automated by a good BCM software package, we'll make sure that everything runs more smoothly and everything stays more up to date. And finally, the last specific action I'm going to recommend is to fund it and staff it. Now, I've often joked that if a company's serious about something, they're going to fund it and staff it. But realistically, with your business continuity program, you can't expect to reap the benefits of it if it's not funded and it's not staffed. If people don't have the right tools to do it, if they don't have the right training to do it, if there isn't staff available to do it, then it's simply not going to get done. So definitely fund it and staff it, and let everybody know you're serious about business continuity, and let everyone know that it's important to the business. So, as some final thoughts, first thing I'd like to say is that don't be intimidated. It might seem like a lot of work to bring your business continuity program into the fold and make sure that it's run properly. Make sure that it gets the care and feeding that it needs and things like that. But no single piece of it is terribly difficult. There's a lot of steps to it, a lot of different pieces, a lot of balls to juggle up in the air, but no particular piece of it is particularly difficult in the overall management of it. Another thing that's important is to don't worry if you don't get it right the first time, because you probably won't get it right the first time. And nobody ever does get it right the first time. So, do the best you can. And then business continuity is one of these processes where it's cyclical. You go through, and it's an iterative process of improvement. You take what you learned from this year's exercises, and you use that to improve your plans so that when next year's exercise comes along, things are better, you're more responsive, you're more resilient. And the other thought that I would definitely bring together is to put together a plan and stick to it. If you've got a direction you want to go, get that on paper, create that 3-year plan or that 5-year plan of where you want to take your business continuity program, and then stick to it. Because if you don't have a plan, you're not going to achieve what you want to achieve. So briefly, I'm going to talk for a second about Sayers and who we are and what we do. Sayers is a company that was founded over 40 years ago. We do IT services and consulting. But as far as business continuity goes, we like to take a holistic approach. So the way that we approach things is we will tend to do an assessment, just like I talked about, to determine what needs attention. So we'll go through and we'll do assessments on information security, the maturity of your disaster recovery program, the maturity of your business continuity program, and then take the information from those assessments and develop a holistic plan to address your immediate needs, and then also help you put those metrics in place, help you write your governance so you can track program improvement. And then finally, once we figure out what you need in order to move you in the direction you want to, we'll recommend technologies to increase the resiliency and security of your overall environment. So, thank you very much for your time.